5 elements of a sex story. Use the 5 elements of a sex story to make it great. After all, the 5 elements executed properly are what makes a sex story believable. They include everything it takes to make it seem real: characters, setting, plot, conflict, and resolution. Together, the 5 elements of a sex story pull the reader in from the very beginning. They are necessary to maintain the interest. Ultimately, they make them want to know more and see how the story ends. The characters. The main characters of a sex story are the people that the sex story is about. They are involved in the majority of the steamy, sultry, and sexy action. Writers should introduce the readers to each of the main characters in the story. Above all, they should provide enough background and information for a reader to imagine the characters. The characters must have interesting backgrounds that set them apart. Obviously, this makes them more interesting. For example, one character might be an escort, while another may be into the swinging lifestyle. Physical attributes and personality traits should be discussed in depth. Authors should also take the time to develop the supporting characters. Above all, their role and intention must be clear enough to play into the sexual imagination of the sex story. Interactions. Interactions between characters determine the way the plot will develop. For this reason, it's important to know where each of them is coming from. Main characters will supply the focal point of the story. Supporting characters will supply additional details, explanations, or actions. Together, character interactions provide the majority of the entertainment in the story. Sex story authors need to maintain character consistency so the reader can understand and believe what is happening. Hopefully, they might have an idea about what each character might do next. The setting. Settings are the places that sex story action is happening. The sex story author should describe the environment in vivid detail. The reader will actually feel like they can imagine the scene. This is when you know you've done a good job. Abnormal settings can be arousing. In contrast, everyday scenes and settings help a reader to better visualize a story. As a result, they'll feel more connected to the plot. You want them to feel like they are there because that heightens their experience. In the end, distractions disappear as they get deeper into the story. The plot. A plot is the nitty-gritty storyline around which the entire sex story is focused. A good sex story plot will have 3 things. Firstly, it must have a clear and concise beginning. Secondly, it will have a juicy middle story. Lastly, there will be a dramatic orgasm-inducing end. The plot will have all the requisite detailed erotic descriptions and erotic suspense, sometimes referred to as exposition. This is so the reader, devouring the content, can make perfect sense of the sexual action. Ultimately, you want them to remain enthralled from beginning to end. The conflict. Every sex story, like any other story, has a conflict to resolve. The sexual plot should be centered on the sexual or moral conflict and the methods that the characters try to or actually use to resolve the problem. The sex story's erotic action will grow in excitement, building sexual tension. We call the period just before the resolution the climax. The climax is best placed very late in the sex story because it signals a coming resolution and ending. Don't let it happen too early, or your readers might start skipping parts of the sex story. You don't want it too late because your reader will leave unsatisfied. The resolution. Simply put, resolution in a sex story is the way the characters deal with the sexual tension. For example, Susan often resolves sexual tension by finding a stranger. She lets him take her from behind at some secluded location. In the end, he pounds her into ecstasy before she goes home and acts like nothing happened. It is extremely important that the resolution is in line with the rest of the sex story. It should match the undertone, imagination, and character development. Most importantly, it must resolve the different aspects of sexual tension. The 5 elements are all key components of a good sex story. The 5 basic elements of a good sex story are crucial for keeping the story flowing. In addition, they allow the sexually arousing action to develop in a way that makes sense. Readers must be able to follow the story. In the end, they should be aroused and excitedly waiting for the story to play out. These are the 5 elements of a good sex story. Remember them, use them, and make the story great. Take care.